Good evening and welcome to Explorers Seekers of the Truth, episode 25. Tonight, as always, I am Chad Charlesworth, and I am joined by my best friend and co-host, Les Sienkiewicz. So how are you doing tonight, Les?
I'm doing fantastic, my friend. How about you?
I'm doing good.
That's good. That's good. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to the show tonight. And again, like Chad said, this is our 25th episode, and we're really, really excited about tonight's show, and I hope everybody else is as well. We have a very special guest joining us, but before we begin, I want to remind everybody how you can get in touch with us, because, you know, it wouldn't be a show if I didn't do my usual agenda. So, as always, you can get in touch with us at our website. That's www.explorersgroup.com. We're on Twitter at Explorers Group, obviously on Facebook, facebook.com/Explorers Group. And we're also on YouTube. You can get to our YouTube channel through our live shows tab on our website. And we're on iTunes and Stitcher and quite a few others that I can't think of right now. But, you know, we're all over the place. So, you know.
Yep. Well, that's right, Les. So tonight we have a very special guest. She's an author, cryptozoologist, and an investigative journalist, as well as a TV personality. We were speaking of Miss Linda Godfrey. Linda was so gracious to hang out with us here tonight. She's going to talk with us a little bit about herself and about what she's been up to. And we asked the listeners, please submit your questions to our instant feedback, and we'll try to work them in as the show is going.
Yeah, that's right. So with all that said, Linda, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
We're happy to have you here as well.
So, Linda, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how you actually became involved in the world of cryptozoology?
Sure. I'm from southeastern Wisconsin, lived in various parts of Wisconsin my whole life, and my degree is actually in art education. And the reason that I came involved with cryptozoology was that I wanted to be a cartoonist. And so I was working for a local newspaper, drawing weekly cartoons, that sort of thing. And one day, while I was on the phone with their editor, the main reporter quit. And he just kind of half-jokingly said, well, Linda, would you like to be a reporter? So-and-so just quit. And I said, sure. And he took me seriously. And the next thing I knew, I was a reporter. Well, I've always written for various things, so I wasn't too worried about that. But I'm also very curious. So it seemed like it might be a lot of fun and another way to advance my cartooning. But little did I know that after only a month or so of working as a reporter, I would start hearing rumors around my own hometown of Elkhorn, Wisconsin, that people were seeing what they called a werewolf outside of town. I had never heard the word cryptozoology at that point, mind you. This was back in December of 1991. And, you know, we did not have the internet the way we know it now. It existed, but not like it is now. And, you know, it was just a different time when if you wanted to learn about something weird, you go to a certain spot in the library where they kept those books, you know, and read them there. And there wasn't a lot, there weren't a lot of other ways to gain knowledge. So the fact that people were saying this, and I thought that was ridiculous. I remember I laughed. You know, I have sympathy with scoffers because I didn't believe it at first either. But then it happened that I was working with our county animal control officer. He was investigating puppy mills. And I was in his office to see him about this. And I said, by the way, John, have you by any chance heard that people out on this road called Bray Road, just outside of Elkhorn, have been saying there's something that looks like a werewolf out there? And he said, you mean this? And he opened up his drawer and he pulled out an official county file folder, manila folder, and it was labeled werewolf. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding. Yeah. So, I mean, at that instant, and people say, well, what made you think this was news? Well, in that instant, it became news because when you have a county official with a file folder marked werewolf in his desk drawer, that's news. You know, and you just, it's the county seemingly being bizarre. So he shared what was the folder, which were reports that had come from various people, and they were leaving their contact information, their real names, and right away I thought to myself, well, if they were doing hoaxes, what kind of hoaxer would leave their contact information and their full name so that the authorities could come and get them, if it was shown to be a fraud or something like that. So that intrigued me. And then when I met these people who came from a very wide demographic, they were men, women, old, young, blue collar, white collar, various ethnic backgrounds, they didn't seem to like they were lying or colluding or making anything up or playing jokes. Many of them, those who had had fairly recent encounters, were still very terrified. Some of the encounters were a couple of decades old, and people were still very impressed with the details of them, even if they weren't visibly, shivering and showing reactions to the others. But it seemed to me that it was worth investigating because there were, I had right at the outset at least a dozen. There were more later that came up, and what people don't understand is that 26 years later, it's still happening. So it wasn't just one creature, 1 year, one time. But I figured there were either two explanations. One was that there was some dangerous predator that for some reason had learned to walk on its hind legs. And the other was that somehow there was some sort of illusion that was causing people to think they had seen this, and that it was something like folklore in the making. And I thought that was actually kind of cool, too, if you could be in on the ground floor of a whole new folklore tale, that people would enjoy around the campfire for years. I wasn't thinking anything like, I'm going to be investigating this for 27 years and write books on it, talk around the world. Or I hadn't even gotten to the point where I realized that it wasn't a local phenomenon. That happened when it was published. And we thought, the editor and I, that really nobody would pay much attention to it. They just have some fun with it for a couple of weeks and then it would be done. And little did we know, it went out on Associated Press very quickly, and then everybody started coming. Everybody and their mother were seeking our office, either visiting in person or phoning on a real landline phone or having to look up snail mail and write us. So it was just sort of a crazy atmosphere, and there were busloads of people coming up from Illinois on nighttime tours of Bray Road. It was just beyond our comprehension, why there was so much interest in this, but there was. And the other thing that happened, the neat thing, in my view, that not only was it catching the attention of the media, but people, not just in Wisconsin, but as far away as the Virgin Islands, were getting hold of me and saying, look, this is not a funny thing, it's not a folk tale, it's real, I saw it, and then they would tell me their stories. And this went on for 10 years while I worked at the paper. People would, and it always got a little bit more attention around Halloween, of course, but the people who were calling me seemed just as believable as those very first witnesses in John Frickson's manila file folder. And it just never stopped. And finally, after 10 years, I had kind of run my course at the newspaper. I was ready to try something else. I had another thing that I'd been investigating for 6 years. It was a 1920s historical crime event that I'd collected like 500 court pages and ancient old documents, and it was a murder mystery, a poison. Well, not even a mystery. It was a poisoning by a woman well thought of, with 4 beautiful children and a nice husband in the area that was nationally known at the time, but it's considered so sordid and shocking because she had a college-age lover that it was just completely swept under the rug. Nobody wanted to talk about it, especially back in the 1920s. And I researched, found all the facts, found out where she went, and that she had another life, that kind of thing. That is called The Poison Widow, a true story of sin, strychnine, and murder. And that was actually my first book before I got into the werewolves. And I really was thinking more about going back into some of the other historical crime things. And am I interrupting you? I can't tell. Are you trying to ask me a question? I'm sorry.
Oh no. We're just listening intently. That's all.
Oh, okay. I just thought I heard a voice, and I wanted to make sure I wasn't stepping on you there.
No.
But anyway,
every not to interrupt you, but every now and again, like if one of us get a text message for whatever reason, it comes through our audio. So if you hear a funky noise every now and again, it might be a message coming through. So I do apologize,
okay.
but that might have been
No problem.
what you heard.
No problem. Well, anyway, I left the newspaper, and I actually was also doing professional illustration. I had a rep in Milwaukee, and I was going back. I went back to college to brush up my computer art technique, and also was teaching art part-time. So I was doing a few things, and during that time, I wrote Poison Widow and had no trouble finding a publisher, a regional publisher. And then they were willing to look at what else I had. By then, I had my outline ready for The Beast of Bray Road, Tailing Wisconsin's Werewolf. And I thought this book was going to be the solution to all of my problems of trying to explain to people what happened. And that they would get this book, they could read the whole thing, understand it, and all questions would be answered. Well, again, to my surprise, it just brought a whole new onslaught of people who had seen it, encountered it, and media who were interested in it. So that led to Hunting the American Werewolf. And during this time, I also I started a website that we just looked for kind of weird stories. And that had caught the attention of the writers and originators of the Weird U.S. series. And so I was invited to co-author actually, the Weird Wisconsin book for that series, and then I authored the Weird Michigan book, that series. And it just kind of kept snowballing. And then I did another trio of books for a smaller New York publisher. One is titled Werewolves, one is titled Lake and Sea Monsters, and one is titled Mythology, something like that. I can't even remember. So those were there, and about the time I finished the Hunting the American Werewolf, White Wolf Productions had contracted to produce their well-known TV show Monster Quest. And so they found my book, and that actually was the first episode that they taped, but it happened to be the last one that played in their first of 4 seasons. And they just called it American Werewolf, and it was based on that book. And it's just kind of kept going and snowballing since then. And I think I'm on my 18th published book.
Wow.
That I have, just turned into. I've been this one in the past before that have been with Penguin Random House, and the bigger the publisher, the longer it takes for something to go through the pipeline, and it's just how it works. They have layers of editors that do different kinds of things to it. It's nice because it makes it the best book that it can be, and I appreciate that. But it take a while to get one of these things out, and they keep getting more complicated and complex too. This one took about 1.5 years for me to write, and just about finished me. And it was submitted to the publisher February 2nd of this year, and I'm still waiting to get my final acceptance on it. But it's actually kind of a real shocker. I can talk a little bit about that later on because it has some things I haven't addressed before.
Cool.
So that's kind of how I got from there to here in a nutshell.
Well, we actually share a common industry, you and I. We both worked in the lovely newspaper industry. Of course, you worked in the exciting end of journalism. I worked in the back end of circulation. But yeah.
Well, theory too. If you don't circulate it, no one reads it.
Well, anymore, I don't think anybody reads it. It's gone downhill.
Yeah. Unfortunately, everything's online. The printed paper is not doing so hot.
That's true, and the one that I worked for went out of business a few years ago too, and it's sad because it was a really fun newspaper. I read some accounts where people called it like a just a little shopper ad thing, and it wasn't at all. We were winning national first place journalism awards from that. We had one editor was formerly from New York Ms. Magazine. And we had very qualified people, and they gave us a lot of latitude for creativity. And I think very many newspapers would never have allowed that story, about the first story about the Beast of Bray Road, and it never would have gotten out. And things might be very different these days.
No, yeah, I would have to agree with you. I mean, I worked for one of the larger paper companies. I won't say which one it is. It starts with a B, has an H, and ends in media. But it was such a fight to do anything creative. I worked on the sales end in circulation, and to do anything creative, even with our free product that we put out for every week for free on a Wednesday. To do anything that was, on the paranormal or cryptozoology or local folklore, it took an act of Congress to make it happen.
Yeah, that's how it usually is, sadly, very sadly. But it was kind of funny that I did enjoy my work those 10 years, and they kind of teasingly called me the adventure reporter, because not only of the creature aspect, but I also did skydiving, jumped out of an airplane to write about it, and tested out jet skis on Lake Geneva, and ran around in a pen with some ostrich-like birds that the person had told me they could kick my knee out if I let them get too close to me, that kind of stuff.
Oh. That's nice to know. Hey, go in there, but don't let them near your knees because they're going to kick them out.
Yeah, exactly. The lady's like, yeah, my husband just got his kicked out last week.
Oh, my God.
I'm in there with the photographer, and we're both. And he's I can't think of the name of them right now. They're just about like Rias, they were. They're coming for us, and we're dodging them around the pen. So,
well, you're braver than I am. I don't think I would do that, and I definitely would not go skydiving. You couldn't pay me to go skydiving. Never. I am deathly afraid of heights. There's no way you can get me up there.
I am too. I'm terrified of heights as well. And this was a little 2-seater airplane at the local airport, and it was painted like bright chartreuse green. And I get in, I crawl in there, and with the photographer, and it's decorated inside with rows of skeletons with X's over them.
Oh, geez.
And we're like, what does that mean?
Oh, that wouldn't make you feel comfortable now, would it?
No. And the door to it was open, and actually the photographer was supposed to go out too, but he chickened out. So he didn't get quite the same pictures. He got some nice ones of me, jumping off. I will admit, when you go to step out, there's a little bar you can hold on to, and it was a tandem jump, so I had an experienced guy attached to me, and he had to pry my fingers off of those bars because, I just got out there and like,
Yeah, I'd probably squeeze fingerprints into that bar if I were up there. I'd be terrified. So
you have to somersault backwards.
Yeah, I wouldn't be up there at all, so I'm good.
You couldn't pay me to get up there. No way. So as you had mentioned before, Linda, you have authored, you said 18 books, give or take. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, you have Monsters Among Us, an exploration of otherworldly Bigfoots, Wolfman, Portals, Phantoms, and Odd Phenomenon, Real Wolfman, True Encounters in Modern America, on and on and on. But one of the topics that stood out to us as you know, we've talked about, and it seems to be a reoccurring theme that you're known for, is the Dogman phenomenon. Now, can you tell us? Can you tell us a little bit more about the this famed beast?
Yeah, you know, to me, it's sort of interchangeable with Wolfman or Man Wolf or whatever, because we really, to my mind, truly don't know what these things are. It's not like we've ever had one in front of us to fully photograph, you know, and, you know, God forbid dissect. I wouldn't want to see that happen. But since we don't know exactly, I think all of those names fit. But with the Dogman, I learned right away. I think it was that first week back in the end of 91, 92. I had a phone call from a DJ in Traverse City, Michigan. Said, "Hey, we got the same thing here that you've got there, you know, that I had dubbed the Beast of Bray Road." And he said, it sounds exactly like what people are describing. And his name was Steve Cook, and he actually had put together, he sort of made use of it. He'd heard of these old logging camp tales, a couple of them, you know, like a couple of loggers were out paddling a boat in one of the lakes, and this huge canine came swimming up to them and was trying to get in their boat with them, and they had to hit him with the paddles. It's like Jimmy Carter hit the bunny rabbit with the paddles back in at the 70s, I think, if any of you are old enough to remember that. But the dog thing almost got in there with him. And he took a couple of those, and then there were a couple of incidents that had happened in the news. Some people went on vacation and came back and found huge claw marks, like 7 feet up on their house, with big giant dog prints, but just the hind prints all around down below. And that was reported to the police. So he took these incidents and then a couple more that he just made up out of thin air and set it to kind of a soft guitar, so it was like a ballad. And then he called it the legend. His legend was this creature was supposed to come out the 7th year of every decade. And so he had started that in 1987. And he sold briskly for a while, but then people just kind of forgot about it. But it would get revived later on. But at the time, it didn't make quite that national splash that the Beast of Bray Road did. I don't know why that is. But it made me realize immediately that there were other creatures that looked like this. And as letters began to come in, I received things from different parts of the country, such as the southern states. A lot of them would say, we have the same thing here, but it's called the Lougarou. And where there were like Cajun traditions, they called it the Rougarou. It was just their version of it. So I'm just kind of taking off on that word Dogman to kind of bring that in as to where that came from and why it's known a little more widely, I think, as Dogman than Wolfman, although I think that this is likely to be Wolfman. But I also, in my first book, coined the term the indigenous Dogman, because I was kind of hypothesizing that, well, really what most people see, and I'll quickly describe what all of these entail, is, and not just on Bray Road, but everywhere, is something with a canine head, a long muzzle, pointed ears. They'll always say the head like a wolf or a German shepherd with long shaggy fur, usually dark brown, sometimes gray, sometimes black. And they'll say the weird thing is, it was walking on its hind legs, on its toe pads, the leg turned backwards. And when they say that, I know that they're seeing a canine leg, because canines do walk on their toe pads, and what we would think of as the heel, called the hock for them, and that's off the ground. So it looks like a leg turned backwards. And it occurred to me that, especially after a couple of footprints were found at these sites, and they looked like very, very large footprints, I thought, well, what if there was a wolf that had just a very simple mutation where they started having large footprints, and they found out it was easier to balance than it was before on their hind legs, and that there were advantages such as looking through these tall grass prairies and being able to see something coming at them, or being able to use their front paws for hanging on to the carcass they just killed or stole or whatever they were eating, rather than having to drag it with their teeth to a safe place. So I thought, well, maybe it's just something that is homegrown everywhere, and it looks like kind of like a dogman or a wolfman, and I just named it that. And I'll tell you what, that image that I drew, like a forensic sketch that showed what I thought most people were describing, and it's probably my most stolen image that I've ever created. I see it all over the internet. I'll find people will open new websites and use it for like their header art. It's just sort of out there, so I don't even think about it anymore because it's too widely gone. But that's sort of where the Dogman thing comes from. I think it began with the Michigan Dogman being brought back to popularity, and then my calling it the indigenous Dogman gave rise to it.
Now, one thing that I find that I'm kind of curious about is I've seen online, because you had mentioned about the footprints, I'd seen kind of different variations. Some of them look like your standard dog print, but like you said, very large. But other ones almost had like a heel, like an elongated back portion of it that looked like a heel.
Right.
And I don't think it was really like you had mentioned about the hawk. I don't think it was like the leg kind of going into the mud or whatever. This looked more defined and, excuse me, more of a wider, almost like the back end of a human footprint, but the front end of the like a dog print. And can you give us any bit of a detail on that, or do you know any more on that, like why there's that difference, or which one is more accurate?
Well, any ones that I've seen, actually, I do think it's the hawk, because, for instance, I had one really good set that I have photos of it online somewhere, and it happened in South Milwaukee, believe it or not, where there's kind of a lonely road that leads to the Lake Michigan shore, and people were chased by one that popped out of a cornfield there. And I was there within a couple of days and lucked into finding a fresh mud puddle where you could see a deer had gone through, and the deer sort of walked back and sprang. And then you could see there were these canine prints, and they were just like the big wolf print, as you say at first. And then you can see where they sprang back and leaped after the deer. And they did look a lot like an elongated footprint. But I do believe that it was the hawk, because that's how it would have to lean back and then launch itself, before it could spring after the deer. So I do think that they can look very much like footprints or like it's a heel, but you have to then think about, well, if that were true and it were able to walk around flat-footed or plantigrade, that would give a really different looking leg. Its leg would turn into something more like a bear or a Bigfoot, or even closer to human. And unless you're really going to change the anatomy, the canine anatomy of all of these things all over, the world where they're seen, I just don't see that as likely as it being a mutation, and then the hawk logically dropping back to help it spring forward. Okay. They're also not seen in big, long trackways, is another thing, where there have been long trackways that people have followed. They don't see that hawk coming. They don't see that heel. It just, and ones that I found other places too, they just look like a really large, 5.5 to 6 inch wide wolf print.
That's big, though, even still.
Very big.
5.5
very
inches
big.
Wide.
Yeah.
That's
They're definitely bigger than the biggest dog prints. Well, wolf prints are bigger than dog prints.
Right. But that's big.
Still, that would be the outside largest measurement for, say, a big timber wolf.
Interesting.
So on your website, Linda, you had mentioned that there seems to be like a pattern of sightings. You state from like 10:30 p.m. to like 5 a.m. there's more reports of Dogman sightings. Do you have anything that's kind of identified as a reason why it's higher during that time frame?
Well, I don't think it's anything more unusual than the fact that most, wolves are usually most active at night. When they start howling at sundown and they're out there, being predators.
Mm-hmm.
But there are sightings. There are plenty of sightings in the daytime too. And it's kind of the same thing for Bigfoot. That's when nighttime is when the raccoons are running around and the deer are moving and they're in a vulnerable spot when they're bedding down. It's just the most advantageous for them to be out there. And also, if they're around inhabited human places, such as the Beast of Bray Road, it's when they're the least likely to be seen as they go about, move from place to place.
Mm-hmm. Now, seeing that like the Dogman holds such a strong resemblance to the folklore of a werewolf, with the sightings, has there been any increase of sightings due to, based on moon cycle or anything like that?
Not that I can tell,
Okay.
and I've always kind of paid attention to this. The trouble is not many people have a fresh enough event that they know the exact date that you can check the lunar cycle, but
Okay.
sometimes they do. And in my latest book, Monsters Among Us, any encounter story that included the date that I could go look it up, I checked for the lunar cycle and the solar cycle, and to see how big the sun flares were at the time, and also looked for associated UFOs and other anomalous things like anomalous light forms.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found was that the solar flare connection seemed to be much stronger than the moon phase connection. And the most often reported moon phase was the 3/4 moon rather than the full moon.
Interesting.
Now, this was not a huge sampling. I mean, it could still be proven wrong if someone had a really large sampling that would be more accurate. But I still thought, it was interesting that right away you couldn't prove anything from it just by the ones that were known. That you couldn't prove that there was a connection with full moon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm often interested, as we interview guests that kind of have, a not necessarily a specialty, but something that they've, researched thoroughly. A lot of times, I've presented the similar questions with other creatures, and I neither get oh yes, I've done my due diligence, and here's even a step further. I've looked at solar cycles, I've looked at, different corresponding factors, or I get well, I never really thought of it that way. I look at it more on a scientific level, and I'm thinking, well, that is all science. That's all you're collecting all this data. And to me, I would run it through every spectrum I could. I'd be out there with a K2 meter checking the areas where people are saying they're seeing this from to see if there is a high, electromagnetic frequency that could be affecting the brain. But a lot of researchers don't go to that level, and that was when you had said about the solar cycles, I was like, wow, Linda really does her research on that.
I do have a tri-field meter, and I take it out. I've never gotten any kind of a fluctuation or reading in spots where these have been. But again, you have to remember, so few of the reports are really fresh that you could expect any residual sort of readings to still be there, unfortunately. So and then there's always another angle to it too, because thinking about the full moon thing, is it that creatures might be running around for their own purposes more in a full moon, or is it that when there's a full moon, more people are out doing whatever you like to do outdoors because it's light out, and they can see better. If there's a full moon on a white field of snow, it's just like daylight.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was just going to say, like during a full moon, to me, it would be a little bit more practical if it were to be a hoaxer. Especially a hoaxer dressed up in a costume, it'd be easier for them to see and run around and get to point A to point B than it would be during a new moon or a waxing moon, or another phase of the moon. Because I'm glad that you brought that up as well, because that was my thought too. Is like, if somebody's going to be pulling a prank, they got to be able to see. Because it's hard enough to see through a mask to begin with, let alone doing it at night. So
now,
exactly.
Go ahead, Chad.
No. I was going to ask, Linda, you said about the tri-field meter and stuff like that. Have you checked, like with the witnesses, have you checked their homes or just the areas where they claim to have seen the creature?
Well, I don't always get invited to homes, but and the other problem is that, I get encounters from all over the country, and there's no way I could travel to all of these places. Right. I have taken tri-field meters into people's homes where they were having poltergeist experiences, and I just haven't felt that I saw anything really conclusive. But I have a simple little compass that I've taken in places where there's been a concentration of events, and the compass doesn't behave right.
Mm-hmm.
More sensitive than the tri-field meter. So that's interesting. And it does occasionally happen that, and I think this is worth mentioning, that when people have the type of sighting where they see the creature not out on some roadway, but either on their property or close enough to their property that they believe it followed them home, they'll often see it again, and it's hanging around. And while these things are hanging around, they're having poltergeist and other sorts of weird activity in their house. In two different places. One was way up northern Wisconsin. The other one was a suburb of Milwaukee. Both of them had these kinds of experiences where the wolf-like creature was hanging around their house. In one case, I found the footprints all around underneath their windows, like it had been turning and looking into the house at them. And both of them had this same thing where they'd be sitting nicely in the living room, and all the faucets in another room would turn on. The bathroom faucet would turn on, the kitchen faucet would turn on, and their dogs would be sitting and barking at nothing, barking at the corner where humans could see nothing. That kind of thing was happening.
Now, that's kind of interesting, because if you go back to the original Mothman cases, and I think even some of the Chupacabra cases that were reported in clusters, there was also associated poltergeist activity logged in those areas during those windows of the early Mothman sightings in the 60s. There was poltergeist activity that was within the town and within some of the witnesses' homes. Linda Scarberry, she had reported poltergeist activity. There was the family outside of town that reported it. And then I think even with some of the Chupacabra cases, there was reports of poltergeist activity with people that witnessed it around their home.
Right. Yeah, it's something it's definitely associated. And of course, we haven't mentioned this yet, but there's the other great bane of all of us who go out to research in the field, because we've all had the same experience, is trail cams. Trail cams ideally should be showing these creatures coming out in spades, because they're sneaking around at night. You can, put a bait animal up or something, and you can have it dead probably ahead of time. And I've actually collaborated on someone who's been doing this. I think we had 18 different deer carcasses over the course of 3 years. And everybody knows what happens when you put the trail camera up. There will be a raccoon that waddles through, and the neighbor's dog, and they're perfect high definition photo reality there. And then all of a sudden, there's a black or a white or a blank couple of frames, and when the camera comes back on, it's perfectly clear again. bait is completely gone, and there's nothing to show what took it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Now-
it happens to everybody. I've almost given up on trail cams myself because it's happened for all these years. And
Now,
not just me. If you ever heard of Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, where they were using 6 at a time, and it didn't make any difference.
Yeah, I was going to ask with the trail cams, because we actually we use trail cams in a lot of the research we do, even with the paranormal end of it. But a lot of times we would put them out and we would set them, some on video, some on still, and we would get the video clip of, facing, the area where it's facing, and then you'd hear something like snorting behind it, like almost on the, 7 foot up in a tree, and it sounds like whatever is standing inches away from, same height as it, inches behind it, just like snorting or exhaling, but nothing on the video, but you'd hear the different little, snorts and grunts and stuff behind it. So
I think they're trying to tease us with that. You know what I mean? I think they know that we know that they know that there's a camera there, and they're teasing us, just standing right by saying, "You can't see me,"
Yeah. Well, it sure seems that way.
Because we had we have a location in Pennsylvania, not far from where I live. It's actually a property I used to live on, and there was some interesting activity, which I don't want to go into much of detail with because it's going to be another show that we're doing. But for example, we had a trail cam out in a very ideal location where there's a great throughway, lots of game trails, so on and so forth. And we'd get all these pictures of deer passing through, like videos, deer going through, you hear them stomping through and they make a distinct noise. You can have those damn squirrels that would, be in the tree in front of you, that always setting the thing off, or a crow. And then, like Chad had said before, and we got this one video. It was pitch black. There was no audio or no video in it, but you could hear the audio, and you hear these real heavy footfalls. I know this was a location where there were multiple Sasquatch reports, and you could hear this. And I mean, with a quadruped, you kind of have that like that multi-foot fall sound, and this was a very heavy. And you could hear that real kind of throaty, breathy, like, and it wasn't like a bear. Now I go backpacking a lot in the Appalachian Trail, and I've actually had our camp the one time was visited by a black bear, and the sound of the bear breathing. It's very distinct.
I've been in a tent where a mother bear was walking around and actually hit the tent wall right next to my head. Then they caught her and her cub in a culvert trap the next day, so I know I wasn't imagining it.
I know.
But yeah, you can tell. I'll never forget what a bear sounds like after that night.
Yeah, it's very distinct. I remember it was me, my wife, and our friend Joe. When it was just the three of us, we were out backpacking, and we could hear the bear coming up, step after step. That bear breathing. It went through the camp and everything, and I tell you, I was fully prepared to throw my wife out first. I mean, I'm not kidding. I was willing to sacrifice, But it's scary, all joking aside, it's very scary when you hear that and you're lying there basically like a human burrito. You know what I mean? Inside this tent, and it's terrifying. But back to that trail cam video, we heard the footfalls, we heard the breathing, and it was almost like it was literally like right next to the thing breathing into the camera, but the video was completely black, and I have no idea why that happened, but every other video came in crystal clear both day and night. So, very strange.
And it's very frustrating, but it's universal, and it's if you ever do get now, there are people who will send me photographs, and it's like a woods, and it's really hard to tell that there's anything there, and it's not that I don't believe that they saw what they said they saw. It's just that it doesn't register for some reason on our film and video that we have. It's like it's in some other range, whatever it is that's doing these things, making the footprints and eating the bait.
Right. Yeah, it's tough. It's and it makes you almost think like Chad had mentioned before. You know, is there a paranormal connection or possibly an extraterrestrial connection? Because I know some of the Dogmen and a lot of the Bigfoot stories, especially Stan Gordon's stories or reports, I should say, have a very strong UFO Bigfoot connection there, and there's always different kinds of interferences that kind of come along with that when you're experiencing the encounter, you know. So who knows?
Right.
I mean, the world is
Well,
still a mystery.
it is, you know, and that field that I was alluding to, where I helped him for 3 years, was not only like Dogman Central for footprints and weird unknown creatures, but also had very, very many very weird lights that were caught. And actually, one experience, and this is the Monsters Among Us book that details this. We had a carcass out that nothing was touching. It was like almost as if other things were, the normal little scavengers even were afraid to come up to it. And so I suggested that we do a stakeout. And so the field owner, who's a retired math teacher from Chicago, and my colleague Sanjay Singhal, who's had a lot of experience in these things, and I set out, and it was a nice August night. There was a lot of planes in the air, and this one light that looked like an airplane suddenly stopped right over a tree line, and I showed the other guys where to look, and as soon as we all looked, it began to proceed across the field toward us in a direct line, and it stopped about 30 feet from the car, maybe 30 feet in the air, and it looked to be about the size of a basketball. It was a glowing whitish sphere, and it just stopped and hung there. And the three of us were, you know, the field owner was yelling, "That's not possible in physics. That thing can't, you know, it can't be real. What is, you know?" And we were kind of going nuts. And Sanjay took the flashlight and aimed it out the window at it. And for a second, it didn't do anything. And we all felt like it had some curious curiosity as to what we were and what we were doing. We all felt that it was surprised. And then all of a sudden, it just kind of fell in on itself. It's hard to explain it. But so this is something that had been hovering right over the tree where most of the carcasses were laid next to, and which was on the other side. And we had purposely parked across the field in order not to, you know, give ourselves away unnecessarily. So it was definitely an association. These things.
Now, how big did you say the light was?
We all estimated that it had to have been about the size of a basketball.
And
you know, and we were all
far away.
We were about 30 feet. It was 30 feet in the air, and maybe it dropped straight down to the ground. 30 feet maximum away from us, probably closer to 25 or even less.
So you'd be plenty close to know that it wasn't a plane or anything passing by.
Oh yes, I mean, yeah, a plane 25 to 30 feet away from you is going to be plowing into you within a millisecond.
Yeah.
So it could not have been any other thing.
Yeah.
And the three of us all saw it the same way at the same time.
Yeah, that's way too close to misidentify it, because I had a similar experience. At a place at a place that was known for what was called the Angel of Eck. It's in Ecksville, Pennsylvania, and supposedly this angel starts as a ball of light and travels closer to you, and as it gets closer, you see it start to take form of like a human. And then right when you could start making out details, it disappeared. And we were all out on, me and a bunch of friends. This was many, many years ago. We were high school, and we were all out there. Some of the people were drinking and whatnot. And, so I don't know. I felt like I was babysitting more than I was ghost hunting at that specific occasion. But I went out there with the sole purpose of trying to find, this supposed ghost. And we had a similar experience where we saw this ball of light just kind of going parallel to us. Then it stopped, and it stayed in one spot for a while. And it was about, like you said, about the size of a basketball. And it looked like it was just not too far from us. And then it started coming closer and getting larger and larger, and we're all freaking out. And then some of the drunk people started freaking out, and they're like, oh, and then we were literally on the edge of a cliff, and I'm like grabbing a hold of people so they didn't fall.
Oh my
and they're
God.
freaking out. And I said, look, I said, worst case scenario, if anything happens, I said, we're linking arms and we're walking out of here together. I said, I'm not losing anybody. You know, nobody's going to get hurt due to stupidity, you know. And right before people really lost their minds, the light went out, and all of a sudden we saw a red and blue light blinking, and it was a plane coming from the Allentown airport.
Oh.
But it was so weird because it was funny the way you were describing that. It just made me think of that. And I was like, well, maybe she experienced what I experienced, but you were way too close. And this
we
was
were way too
off in the
close.
distance. Yeah.
And we watched it. You know, it deviated from the flight path that there were actual planes. It was like it was imitating the light of the planes, the real planes.
Right.
And it deviated and just set off across the field at us. And we were all, I mean, we were watching it and kind of going crazy, saying, hey, what is it? What is it? You know, and I was fumbling with my camera, trying to get it up in place because I was in the back seat. And I don't know what had happened if Sanjay hadn't actually used that flashlight, you know, and made it disappear. But then he got out of the car. He said, I have to see if it just fell behind this bush or something. And he got out and he walked around this kind of clump of bushes, and he got immediately back in the car and said, I have to leave. I'm sick. I'm really sick. Just getting out of the car made him very ill. And so that ended it, and we had to leave. But yeah, we all had, and I'll tell you, when it sort of fell into itself and popped out of existence, I don't know how else to explain it, then we all really yelled because it was like,
freaky.
It was, yeah, it was too close, and we all saw the same thing. Yeah. You know, it was just not what was possible.
That's interesting too, because a lot of times when people have UFO encounters, there's that radiation supposedly that they admit, and a lot of people do have nauseating reactions and, you know, dizziness, vertigo, and whatnot. So that's interesting. But then again, on the other hand, too, people that have Bigfoot encounters also claim they get nauseation and vertigo from infrasound. Yeah. So I don't know. But we do have one question from one of our listeners, and they asked if anybody had ever shot one at any point, and did they ever get any hair or blood samples to your knowledge?
I've had a couple of people who have actually. One guy actually emptied an automatic clip into one of them. He was fishing down in somewhere near Selma, Alabama. Mm-hmm. And they do this kind of flatboat fishing where they're kind of trying to get the big catfish, you know. Yeah. So they're in the shallows. And he said he turned and his dog started barking, and he looked, and there was an upright wolf-like creature standing there staring at him. And it started heading for him and the dog. And the water was so shallow, he said it could have just splashed in. And he was afraid for his dog. And so he just emptied this clip at it. And it just sort of acted like it was a little hurt and then limped off into the bush. And when he finally got up the nerve to come back on shore, there was no sign of it. You know, he said it would have knocked down, killed just about any other big predator that size that he saw. And this is often cited for Bigfoot. It's happened a number of times with Bigfoot too. But I did one time, I did do a public talk, and later on, after everybody had gone, this farmer came up to me and said, you know, I'm pretty sure I shot one of those things, meaning the upright canine, on my farm. And he actually probably lived 15 minutes from Bray Road. He said it was, you know, like 5 or 6 years ago. I think that was what the time frame that he gave. And he said, I shot it, and then I started thinking, well, it just looked like a big old dead wolf, and it was illegal to shoot wolves in the state, and I'd get in trouble if anybody saw it. So he said, I just dug a hole and buried it. And I asked him if he would dig it up, you know, so I could get samples or something. And he just, no. He said, I would never do that. And he left. But I could tell he was nervous just telling me about it, but it was like he thought I should know, and so he gave me that much of it.
That's a little upsetting, I would imagine, for you. I mean, when you have basically the everything you're looking for basically right in front of you, and then they won't let you do it. That's the frustrating part with the investigative and research end of it, is when you have people. I mean, it's great that they gain the courage to tell you their story, but at the same time, it's just like it's so frustrating when they won't give you everything, you know.
Right. It's like, yeah, just let me dig it up, and we'll have something. You know, hopefully the DNA will last. But and a lot of times, things that they leave. I mean, I've had people turn in really weird looking hair. One was from the roof of a house where there were large canine type footprints around the house, and the woman had heard something jump on. There's a little cottage up by Lake Geneva, so it was a low roof. She'd heard something climb up the tree and then jump on her roof, run across it, and jump down. And she discovered there was a great big pile of poop up there. And I went there. I drove there, and I had to stand. I stood on one of her outdoor bar stools with kind of a dustpan that she had and another big bag, because she hadn't told me about exactly what it was, or I would have come better prepared. And I took it to a DNR official, and he examined it, because there was like a turkey claw in it, and you know, it was quite interesting material there. But he said that it was raccoon, definitely raccoon scat, and that they can fool you because they tend to latrine. That is, they will go in the same spot time after time until you know, they build a certain reaches a critical mass, whatever critical mass for poop is in the mind of a raccoon, I don't know, but it's called latrining, and that was what this was.
Wow, that's interesting. So, you learn something new every day, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So
I had.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
I was just going to mention off the cuff. In book before, I think it's the book before that, American Monsters, I had a story from a Southern family, Tennessee, I'm pretty sure it was, that had been saving what they were sure was Bigfoot, where the Bigfoot had evidently just sat down on one of these concrete building blocks that's open in the center and done its duty and left it there. And they had been saving it in a shed on their farm in Tennessee for like a year.
Oh, geez.
And I actually I found a forensic lab that has cooperated with examining things like that in the past. And they said, "Are you kidding me? It's been a shed in Tennessee for, you know, a year. We would not, can you imagine the bacteria? We would not even go near that." So I'm sure they were right too, you know, about that. But things do get left, but it's really difficult to procure pristine samples of them and then find somebody who will actually examine them for you.
So I guess that's a lesson learned, is make sure it's fresh. Don't let it sit around too long, right?
That helps. That helps, especially if it's scat, yeah.
So in your one book, Michigan Dogman, Werewolves and Other Unknown Canines Across the USA, you mentioned during your time filming that Monster Quest episode in 2006 that you saw something. Can you take us back to when that took place and tell us what you experienced?
Yeah, people always ask me if I've ever seen a Dogman, and I have to say maybe. There was one incident where we were on this lonely gravel road. It was like between 2 and 3 a.m. It was 95, 96 degrees. There was lightning in the distance. It was misty. Very, very creepy atmosphere. And all night long, we had 3 eyewitnesses, and there was the History Channel cameraman with a van and me, and he had a spotlight set up on one end of the road. And then there was nothing the other way. And just, wouldn't you know it, he was turned away from that spotlight, the camera, and something made me turn around and look at it. And just then, something ran across the road. Its spine caught the outer edge of that spotlight, like it was trying to circle around it, but just for a second, its spine showed. And it was upright, it was quite large, and it was gray fur, and that was what the people had said they had seen there like a couple of weeks previously. And it went across the road, and for a second it blotted out, and it was moving very fast, it blotted out a reflective road sign on the other side of the road, and when we measured it, it was 7 feet tall, what the part that was blotted out. One of the other witnesses also thought it wasn't just me. So I may have seen a Dogman spine, and I'll tell you, if there had been somebody running around, I don't know how anyone could run around in that sort of an atmosphere at those temperatures without, falling into a faint from heat exhaustion. Mm-hmm. Because it's just, we were just dripping sweat standing there as it was.
Interesting.
Now,
go ahead, Chad. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
During the summertime, that was while you guys were filming. But now, if you start getting into more like the fall season, when some of the sighting times seem to peak up a little bit, now, do you think that could be hoaxers just trying to get a thrill out of people, like pulling the Halloween prank? Or is it could it be misidentification of like foraging bears trying to fatten up before winter?
Well, I think the human hoaxers are more likely than misidentification of bears, because bears, my dad grew up in northern Wisconsin, and I've seen bears out in the wild, and anybody who's ever seen a bear knows how different it is in its profile and the way it moves. Even though they can stand on their hind legs for a couple of steps, they don't usually, unless they have front paws that are injured for some reason. But bears, I think, may account for a couple, but not many. But there are human hoaxers. And I know there have been at least 4 that I'm aware of out on Bray Road. And these were, in one case, was a county official, and he had a gorilla suit that he went out on Halloween and ran across the road a couple of times. Another one was a farmer that didn't like people parking on his property, and he got a bear suit, popped up at their window, probably gave him heart attacks almost. But he really didn't look like, anything like a wolf. And there were a couple of kids out there that had wolf-like Halloween masks. But here's the thing, none of those alleged hoax appearances matched up with, time-wise or in details, of any of the reported incidents that I'd had where people had actually come and reported things to me. So that didn't match up. And then they were really only 1 or 2 times. It wasn't like people were there. And you have to remember, the sightings around Bray Road had gone back at least till 1981. I got an older one in another county adjacent, but in that county, they go back at least till 1981. And the Bigfoot sightings go back to, from the county, most of them are at Bray Road, though I've had a few. The Bigfoot sightings go back to the 60s.
Yeah.
So you've got either lifelong hoaxers or, it just doesn't make sense. There's no way they could account for all the sightings over all those years.
Mm-hmm. And I don't, to me, I would be so afraid to do a hoaxing of a Bigfoot or a Dogman, especially in like the area of Bray Road and stuff like that, where it's farms and farmers who are going to protect their land. Or, like you said, the guy who ran out in front of, ran back and forth across the road. I'd be afraid to get hit by a car or somebody shoot me, thinking, "Oh, I'm going to shoot a Bigfoot, and I'm going to be rich and famous because I shot a Bigfoot," and it ends up being some guy in a bear suit or a gorilla costume.
Right. It's very true. Or what if you were running across and you made someone have an auto accident because they were so afraid of you? And they're actually, there's a guy a few years ago. This happened in Montana where he had a ghillie suit and was running across a highway trying to look like Bigfoot, and I think he was actually hit by 2 different cars.
Yep.
And killed.
I do remember that, yes.
Yeah, so I don't think these are high IQ people that are doing this.
No.
Well, and you got to think too. I mean, think about teenage kids, especially in those rural areas. They're probably bored. They probably, were out drinking or something like that, and they're like, "Hey, buddy, let's do something fun. Let's dress up like a werewolf and scare people." So, yeah.
And like I said, I know that it happens now and then, but it just isn't. It can't possibly happen enough, or in all the places to justify the hundreds of encounters that there've been. Right. And you can get into with Bigfoot, you can get into thousands of encounters.
Oh yeah.
Well,
go ahead, Chad. Sorry.
Well, even the area that we had referred to that we had been researching and stuff like that. To go out and pull off a hoax is one thing, but to go off and pull out a hoax that somebody actually happens to be in that area to see is a completely different.
Right.
The odds of that are so, unless you know exactly where these people are going to be around 7:30 at night or 10 o'clock at night, to just go out and try to pull off a hoax isn't really, and the size of a lot of these stories and people that can show you reference points of, look, this is 7 foot high and this is where the thing crossed. Even if you're pulling off a hoax, to get something 7 foot tall, and let's face it, if you have a 7 foot tall teenager running around, pretty sure everybody in town knows him.
Right, exactly.
That was
exactly,
to my point there, Chad, is what I was going to say is, like, a lot of these Dogman reports, some of the reports, which I'll bring up these little images here on screen. We have these models here, or diagrams, where you have like an average 6 foot tall human, and then you have these dogmen that have been reported at 7-8 feet up to 10 feet tall. You're not going to
which is a little off.
Yeah,
I don't really buy the tall ones, most of them, because they just by and large.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
5 to 7 feet is on their hind legs is the average. Mm-hmm. Some maybe approaching 8, but that's pretty big.
That's huge. Yeah, I mean, even if you get a large wolf standing on its hind legs, I could see 6 foot, maybe 7 feet tall. I mean, that'd have to be a really big wolf, but then again, a lot of these reports are of a really large wolf. But the fact that they're seen bipedal, running distances bipedally, a lot of the people explain like a bare human chest and like stomach and abdominal muscles, hands with clawed fingers. Even if a canine were to stand on its hind legs, it's not going to be able to splay its arms out as wide as a human. It's not going to have the same chest structure, nor is it going to have the paws look like hands. So, I mean, those reports are what is a hard pill for me to swallow, just due to the simple fact that there's no real fossil record of any large bipedal canids. Now, I could see it on the Bigfoot side, just because the fact that there are so many fossil records of different kinds of primates or humanoids, or humanids, if you will. But on the canine side, you don't really have that. But and especially to get to these heights,
you're projecting primate features onto what people say. Most people, probably 90% of the reports I get describe something that is wholly canine in its body structure, and that means there's no shoulders, there's no rotator cuffs. Now, the hands or the paws looking like hands can be easily explained by if you had just a slight mutation for a longer paw. If you ever look at go somewhere online and look for skeleton of wolf and look at how their paws are, they have actual digits that are almost as long as fingers, and then you have the long claws, which makes them look bigger. But the thing is, especially wolves have thick mats between them. So normally with dogs too, you have that matted fur between them, and you don't realize that there are still other bones going through that matted fur, that they could look longer.
Right.
So the paws don't bother me too much, but then there is a certain smaller subset of sightings where they do say, no, it had actual shoulders like a human. Mm-hmm. It had a human torso. It was running more like on its flat feet. And many, many times, not every time, but many, many times, these sightings are made near either native reserve land or places where there's been a lot of human occultic activity. And I'm not going to go into how all this occurs, but in general, you can just say it is supposed to be a type of mental projection where you can take your astral body, if you believe there is such a thing, and it can be. There's some things that can be said for that, but through different. Some say it's through ritual, some say it's through a very rigid sort of psychic training. They learn to be able to project this vision either of something going out from them or covering themselves, kind of like an instant fursuit that comes from your energy. There are different words for it. Some people call it a tulpa. I have one book that was written about a medicine woman who told her disciple, when asked how she could make the actual head of a lynx and then a bear cross over her face, she said, "Well, it depends on which I was projecting." And so there's a lot that I found to sort of support this theory. But so often the ones that are reported to look like that are either around a native reserve or they're at someplace like, one was at a military cemetery in Chicago on the Naval Reserve land. Oftentimes they seem to be associated with what's known as shapeshifters.
Yeah, yep.
And a lot of people start rolling their eyes when you say that because it sounds like something that's strictly to the paranormal side. And it does. I have to say, it doesn't sound like something that could be regular natural creature.
Right.
And where that takes you, there are different conjectures, different places you can go with it, and you can write whole books on just that aspect. And people have, and it's impossible to, if you study this for 26, 27 years like I have, it's impossible not to run into these stories. And for a while, I was sort of ignoring what I consider too much outlandishness myself until I realized I was really not studying the phenomena wholeheartedly as it was given to me to study. I was sort of censoring certain ones. And that was actually why I did the Monsters Among Us book, because I thought, no, I've got, and it just so happened that I received a bucket load of incidents that were in that category. And I thought, well, this is what I should put in the book so that people can understand there are very credible witnesses. The witnesses don't seem any different than the witnesses of the other ones that are saying they saw these things, and then just let the facts of what they saw speak for themselves and lead you where they will.
Right. Well, I definitely do not write off Native American lore or legend, because I always subscribe to the fact that they've been around, especially in North America, like the indigenous people of North America. I think they're so much more in tune with nature and their surroundings, and I think they have a much stronger, and this may sound stupid, but I think they have a much broader mental capacity than, I guess, for lack of better terms, the civilized man. I think they're more open and they're more receptive and they're far more understanding of the natural world than we can ever dream of being. So I wouldn't exactly turn my nose up to any of their stories. You know what I mean?
No, I don't. And they have different divisions of these things too, because the ones that are made by sorcery or ritual, the shapeshifters are one kind, and then they believe that the kinds that look like the ordinary wolf standing on their hind legs are something else, that they're not, they come here from a different place as separate entities. They were never once a human. They've always been what they were, whereas you have these shapeshifters, human medicine men, to these things that look like upright wolves, but they're entirely different entities or creatures. One was always a wolf from another realm, perhaps, but The other ones were people that managed to mimic wolves.
Right.
You know, and then you have other branches like those that are supposed to be guarding sacred burial mounds, the Cheyenne dog soldiers, that are end up being spirit wolves. So there's the division among the Native Americans too of accepting these different kinds, you know, and not just saying, well, there's just no one size fits all for any of this study.
Right, exactly. Now we do have another image that I'm going to bring up on screen here, and this is from the I believe it's the North American Dogman project. They have a diagram of sizes like a coyote, a gray wolf, a bear, and then the Dogman, and this is the quadruped version, and the shoulder height of this Dogman is nearly 7 feet, and that kind of makes me wonder, perhaps these species of dogmen that they're being called, maybe they're just a surviving line of the dire wolf, because the dire wolf was supposedly dwarfed the modern wolf now, and they were massive in size.
Well, if you look it up, actually that's the common thought of them. But I think I read there were like 10,000 dire wolves buried in the tar pits over in California.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of dire wolves to study, and they're not a lot bigger than the timber wolves today. They're not that, but they're shaped differently. Their heads are bigger. They have much more massive jaws for crushing bones and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
They have a different look to their body, but they've also been extinct for quite a long time. It's not that I don't think there could be surviving pockets of them, and I do get recurring reports of things that don't run upright. They look like some sort of a crazy hyped up wolf, and they're much larger than any wolf should be. Very often, one thing they like to do is ram the side of vehicles, even trucks, and almost everyone, and I've got a whole collection of these that I hadn't been publishing for years because I didn't know what to do with them, but they're in the book that's coming out. And their shoulders will reach up to the top of the door in a truck, mm-hmm. which is really huge. And people will describe it very consistently, either a Shetland pony for size or the size of a calf. A growing calf, which is huge, you know, and very scary, very different looking than the other ones. And they're on their all fours.
I don't know. It's hard to make of what this thing could be. I mean, I'm not discrediting. I'm not writing anything off. I mean, I may not, and I don't want to offend anybody, because I know this is some people are dead set on this, and they don't want to hear otherwise. And I'm not belittling anybody, nor am I trying to discredit anybody else's theory. I just say personally, the bipedal thing is harder for me to accept than the quadruped creature. I think the larger, whether it be a surviving dire wolf or some kind of maybe hybrid species of wolf and dog, because I mean there's some they call them
there's something called the amphicyte.
I'm sorry, what's that?
The amphicyte. There's something called the amphicyte, which was it literally means bear dog. And we do have people who see there's a place around Eau Claire, Wisconsin, where they have a bear dog or bear wolf road, and hunters have been reporting for years that they see these things that look like they should be bears in their torso and their general body shape, but then they've got these giant wolf heads, and I've had people report those. So again, but these do run on their hind legs. They're not the quadrupeds. They run on their hind legs. So, but the amphicyons were huge things. They were really bigger than the timber wolves are today. They were bigger than the dire wolves, and looked a lot different too. I've got a drawing of one of those in one of my books. And it's easy to find. You just Google AMPHICYON, amphicyon, and you can find there's some really cool illustrations, and they have skeletal remains of them too.
Wow. I'm gonna have to check that out. Unfortunately, I can't bring up any other pictures. I wish I could bring them up on the show, but I can't. I had to pre-upload all these images that I had now. So I wish I could just share my screen, but I can't, unfortunately. But for anybody listening, you could look that up, what Linda had described, and how are you pronounce that again?
The AMPHA, AM as in more, AMPHICY, and I think it's AN, but it could be ON. I don't have it written to look at, but it's the amphicyon. Ampha would refer to the bear, and the scion would refer to the dog or the wolf, or canine.
That's really I never heard of that. So you really do learn something new every day. How about that? See,
it's been extinct for a while.
But that's the thing. There are some supposed, like the coelacanth. Supposedly that was extinct for millions of years, and they found it. Some Japanese fishermen caught it, and it's alive and well. And there are a few other species that were thought to have been died out during the last ice age that they're finding are still alive and well. So you really never do know, because America is, I think, only like 2% populated. Like the remainder is still very much wilderness. And you think that today, with the way the modern society is, that you would think that we've been everywhere and we've stepped foot in every square foot of land that America has to offer, but that's really not true. There are still so many.
Well, and there's Canada. Canada is attached to us, and the animals don't know where or the creatures don't know where the borders are.
Absolutely.
And you can go up into Canada, and you've got these what they call the Headless Valley, because early trappers would go up there, camp out, and be found with something had chomped their heads right off their bodies, which would take the kind of giant jaw pressure that the amphicyon had. And there were also native traditions. They called it the shikawara-kin, which meant the carrying off dog, because it would sometimes drag these people out of their sleeping bags, or sometimes the body would still be in the bag and the head would just be gone. So you do have the native tradition, and there's a fossil record, and these remote valleys in Alaska where maybe something could survive that long. I don't know. I don't pretend to know
anything's
what's
possible.
possible. Right.
So, we're talking about some of the more widely known Dogman stories, and you brought up the Beast of Bray Road quite a few times. What exactly is the significance of the Beast of Bray Road, or Bray Road in particular, I should say? What makes that so
special that we would have this creature? Well, I have been looking at that question for many years, for several decades, and a couple of years ago, I did finally discover that it was. I was digging for documentation in old records, county records, and I discovered that it was originally a well-traveled Native American trail. It would lead to a lake where there were sacred burial mounds. And it also was covered with maple groves where they would get maple syrup, and that therefore made the road doubly sacred, because maple syrup was a very important additive to their food. When you're hunter-gatherers, you need something that will preserve your food, which the sugar in the maple syrup would do that, and also lend them a very rich and nutritious carbohydrate, which is the syrup itself. So it had this double sacredness about it, and who knows if that means anything in terms of this creature being seen there or not, but it did set Bray Road apart, from a lot of the other roads. And there's a little bit more to that too, that I've talked about at some of my presentations at conferences. But that has to do with the geography of the lakes around there and where Bray Road is set in them. And that's an angle I'm still pursuing and working on. But other than that, it doesn't, it puzzled me for years as to why Bray Road, because it's just 4 miles of pretty much farmland, owned small woods, and nothing really imposing there.
Mm-hmm.
But it has, and there are still sightings going on up to fairly recently. So, and I know I don't hear all of them.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people just keep it to themselves because they don't want to be made fun of. But
Yeah.
and I have a lot more things that aren't in my books, but that are probably just as strong as encounter stories, and I try and speculate there too. You can find at lindagodfrey.com. No W's, just lindagodfrey.com will take you to my blog. I've been having a spate of recent sightings in Michigan, and I've got 2 of them that I recently posted, and I've got several more in my blog folder that are pretty good detailed sightings that will be posted in the next couple of weeks. And I put other things in there too. I've had spirit bird sightings and just things that don't show up in my books or other places.
Cool. Awesome. So everybody go check that out at lindagodfrey.com. On her blog, she's got some cool information out there, new information, which is what exciting for everyone. We always want to find out new, because some of the stories get a little stale, and you hear the same things over and over, and it's good to see that new stuff is surfacing, because it proves that there's still something out there, and it's still active, it's still viable. So there's more research to be done, more evidence to look through and whatnot. So that's awesome. So please, everybody, go check that out, lindagodfrey.com. It's her blog. So Chad, what else do we have on the docket, buddy?
Well, now we covered werewolves and dogman creatures in past episodes, and one of the reports that stood out with the wolfman, werewolf, dogman sightings is the small district of Cannock Chase, England, where they spoke of dogmen being in the woods surrounding cemeteries. Also, when you do a little research on that area, it is the intersection of 2 what they consider ley lines. And if you look at the ley lines in America, Bray Road kind of is in the middle of 3 different three ley lines that run through that area. Do you think there's anything to do with the cemeteries and the ley lines? Do you have I kind of look at ley lines and stuff like that. I kind of go, like I said earlier, I go out on all different limbs to try to put stuff in a pattern or try to build a case for certain things. So with the ley lines and stuff like that, is there anything in the evidence that kind of has that more of the ley line energy theories and stuff like that plays into the Dogman and the Bray Road area?
Well, there aren't any cemeteries out there that I know of, and none of the usual things. I've very often noted that there seem to be concentrations of sightings at burial grounds, ancient sacred sites, military installations, and I've got doozies in my new book that's coming out in that regard that haven't been talked about before. And these happen to be all the same places where the black phantom dog and strange creatures are also found in Europe. So I don't know if it's the ley lines that are supposed to be lines that connect these sacred spots, or the sacred spots themselves, where they seem to be. Crossroads is another one, where people are supposed to encounter these things. So it follows a universal pattern, I think, for these things showing up at such spots. I don't know, again, if the ley lines have anything to do with it, or it's really more the places in themselves, the military places and sacred spots. It seems that way to me, just from what I've seen. But it's something that I, again, always look for myself. I look not only to see what the geological conditions are, what the habitat is, what might be there for things to eat, but also for any of the man-made things like the burial grounds or special institutions, that sort of thing. And you put them all together, and sooner or later you start building a picture that, yeah, these things do hang together, and it makes them seem something other. I have to say it, that is the normal wolves in the woods that are seeking privacy from raising their families and good places to hunt, and that's about it. You know, they don't purposely hang around cemeteries for no discernible reason.
All right. Well, I think that's about all the questions we have for you tonight, Linda. I think you were very thorough, and you really gave us a lot to think about with Dogman, a lot of different avenues to kind of look down, and you definitely did your homework on it. That's for sure. That's why you are the queen of the Dogman, I'd say. So
I don't know if I want that title. That title bears a lot of weight and implications that I don't think I'm quite ready to take on. But thank you. I know it's meant as a compliment. I appreciate that.
I may retract that then, I guess. I don't know. But thank you so much, honestly, for coming on the show. We're really, really glad that you accepted our invitation and took the time out of your busy schedule to just chat with us, and we definitely learned. I was never really overly knowledgeable on the Dogman. Like I knew of it, I knew the general story and idea of it. I never, it's not one of the cryptids that I really dug a lot into, and I really, really, truly learned a lot tonight with the information that you provided, and again, thank you so much for
You're welcome.
Yeah.
You're welcome. And if anybody wants to contact me, you can, again, lindagodfrey.com. You can find there's a form that you can fill out that goes to my email where I'll be more likely to see it. And you can also find the link to my Twitter. I'm Linda S, which stands for Susan, Linda S. Godfrey on Twitter. There's a link to, I have a couple of Facebook pages. My author page is Linda S. Godfrey. And so I'm, a couple different spots. I hang around at some of the Dogman spots, especially Unknown Creature Spot, which is one I started some years ago. So I'm easy to get a hold of if anyone wants to report something or has something else to say.
What was it? I couldn't hear that last part, Linda. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, I said I'm easy to find online if anyone wants to make a report or something.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Thank you so much.
What's that?
And thank you so much, and thanks to all of your listeners too.
Oh yeah, well, thank you. We wouldn't have the show if it weren't for you. We do have one question that came in. Does the environment have an effect on the people that see the activity? Are these locations more prone for sightings due to the effects of the people? So I think we kind of talked about that before, like with like different, with the electromagnetic energy that might be around. I guess there's really, it's hard to say, but I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, it's a hard question to answer. I do think there are some places that have a lot of magnets in their rock structure that they're built on, or a lot of crystal. For instance, in Wisconsin, we have a big, huge ridge kind of in the center part of the state that's made of this really rather rare red crystal quartz stuff. And there are weird things that are reported around there. So I would say it's probably the people itself. It might be more the effects on I think there could be effects on people as to the geology, what we're building our houses on and how much water is there, what type of water. Lots of freshwater springs seem to bring these things out. But it would be an interesting study for someone to undertake.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, there you have it. So on behalf of Chad and myself, I just want to thank you again so much for coming on the show and talking with us and educating people on the Dogman. Chad?
Yeah,
Anything else to say?
yeah, I'd like to, again, thank Linda for coming on tonight. And, it was truly a pleasure to have you on here. And I did, learn a lot about the Dogman in the area. So it's definitely an interesting subject, and I'm, very glad to have gotten to talk to you, somebody who's covered it, for 26 years and has compiled a lot of information and a lot of, good detailed information. And you can, again, find that all on, lindagodfrey.com. So again, thank you, Linda.
You're welcome. It was a great evening, guys.
Thank you so much. All right.
Thank
You
you.
have a good night then, Linda. Good night.
You too. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. So that was Linda Godfrey, everybody. She's very experienced in the Dogman phenomenon. She's got a lot of information, a lot of great books on the subject as well. So like we said, like Chad had said, check out her blog for more information. It's lindagodfrey.com. She's got, lots of news stories, as she said, out there, or a few more stories and a lot of old stories. So check it out. Enjoy it. Yeah. So it was a pretty good show, buddy. I think we definitely learned a lot.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting. If you guys get a chance, please, keep up with Linda. I think it's, like I said, I did learn a great deal about the area and with her stories and her information. And I actually look forward to, getting a couple of her books, sitting down and reading and kind of building my knowledge on the subject. And hopefully one of these days we'll get to run into her at, one of the conferences or something like that and get to sit down with her and talk a little more. So,
yeah, absolutely.
As always, I'd like to thank, the audience for coming along. Like I've always said, you don't always have to agree with everything that's said. It's part of the learning process, and the debate is healthy. So, just because we don't necessarily, fall on one camp or the other, and you do, don't get upset about it. You have valid points. We're always here to listen. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of those situations where everybody has an opinion on something, and some people obviously feel very strongly about theirs. And what we say isn't gospel. We're not bastardizing anybody. We're entitled to our opinion as well. And like I said, I'm open to anything. I'm not saying that it's not an upright bipedal wolf or wolf man or dog man. I'm not saying it isn't. I'm just saying that I have a hard time believing that, but anything is possible. I feel I'm entitled to my opinion just as everybody else is entitled to theirs. So I truly apologize if I upset anybody tonight. That's not my intention. I enjoy this show and I enjoy, hanging out with my best friend and talking about weird things. That's what we do. So again, if I upset you, I apologize, but I hope everybody else had a good show. I don't know.
Yeah, he also had a hard time believing it wasn't butter. So, yeah, make a joke funny, man. Try to make it humorous again. Yeah, I mean, just I learned a lot about the Dogman tonight. It's a subject short of the Monster Quest, and a few times I've heard Linda speak on other programs and stuff like that, and a few other people speak. I really don't have a reference point for it in, my studies of stuff or cryptozoology studies. And, we're going to bring people on like this who are going to educate, inform, and entertain. And we're not always, not everybody's going to agree with their theory on it. We may all believe in Bigfoot, or we all may believe in Dogman or the Loch Ness Monster. But we could all have 20 some different theories and 26 different ideas of what we think it is and disagree with the other 25 people. So,
but it doesn't mean that we're right.
It is entertainment. Don't feel that it's bashing anybody or anything like that. But I enjoy doing this. I enjoy talking to my best friend. I enjoy the people that come in week and week out, and I enjoy getting to meet and speak with people like Linda and Lyle Blackburn and Ken Gerhardt and Tom Seawitt and Jeff Walmsley. I enjoy it, so it's
Yeah. Well, it's like we
hope
always
you
said.
guys are enjoying it.
It's like we always said, whether we have 8 people watching or 8,000 people watching, I get to hang out with my best friend, talk to very interesting people, and talk about the things that we love most. So whether we have 8,000 or nobody, I'd still do the show, and I'd still have a good time doing it because I'm hanging out with my best friend. That's what it's all about. So on that note, I'm getting off my soapbox and saying good night, my friend. It was a pleasure as always. And good night, everyone else who listened and tuned in. We appreciate you. And good night.
And don't forget, you can reach us at www.explorersgroup.com, on Twitter at Explorersgroup, or on Facebook at www.facebook.com/explorers. You can also find the links to our YouTube videos on our website.
That's right. All right, everyone. Good night.
Good night.